Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Lightbox Expo panel. I am JJ Harrison. I'm an illustrator. I've worked on comic books, movie posters, children's books, a lot of stuff over the years. But today we're going to be talking about screen printed posters, movie posters, and how I've made some of these for different companies I've worked for, but mostly the ones I made for Mondo. Let's just take a look real quick at what I'm talking about. So here are some of these posters. So screen printed posters are a limited color. They're made by hand. Uh, they're a lot more difficult to make than just a poster you can print out from a digital printer. But so here's some of the ones I made over the years. Some of these are from Mondo. Um, most of these are officially licensed. But I had a lot of fun making these. You can see these earlier ones are more limited in color. Sometimes they get a little bit more dynamic with dithering and things like that. This one certainly is a more limited color kind of poster. Um, but yeah, I want to talk about a little, just for a moment, how a screen print is made, and then we'll dive in and show how some of these were actually made. So yeah, so if you're not familiar, screen printing, like I said, it's a mostly a handmade process, um, and the way it works is an image is typically broken up into, if it's multiple colors, each color is turned into its own screen. That's why they call it screen printing. And the way that we used to do them, I don't know if they're still done this way, but they would be developed on from a print on some kind of like clear acetate or a clear sheet. So they would take these and then they develop them into a screen. So this is actually a screen print screen, and you can't see it. You won't be able to see it. I mean, I can barely see it with my eyes, but right here in this area where there's nothing, there are tiny, teeny, tiny little holes. And the way it would work is you would, uh, pull ink across this surface onto some other object like paper or fabric to make a T-shirt or a poster. And each different color in the illustration or graphic would make up a different screen. Um, and so nowadays these screens are super fine. Like, I don't know if you've seen a screen print up close lately, but a lot of times it's really hard to see the dots. So they're getting pretty cool. This one, by the way, is from a pair of underoos that I designed years ago for my. I used to be in the 501st. I was TK 5446. I had a stormtrooper armor. We would go and troop, and I made us stormtrooper underoos. I'll show you those real quick. So here they are, underoos. I made these for my garrison. They were pretty big hit all those years ago. Um, Pretty funny thing to do with screen printing, but that was one of the first things I wanted to do in screen printing, and now we're making big time movie posters. So look at us now. Uh, so feel free to throw out questions in the chat as we go through. I will try to get to all those at least by the end of this. But I do want to just get going here. So one of the things we're going to be talking about is how you saw some of those earlier posters have very limited color, very graphic, kind of cartoony. But nowadays, more and more screen prints are getting really photorealistic because we've developed all these cool techniques over the years. So I'm going to share with you some of the secrets I've learned, some stuff that I've learned from friends at Mondo, from having too many hour-long conversations on the phone with Rob Jones, the art director at Mondo, schooling me on how to do this stuff the right way. So one of the big breakthroughs in recent years, I have to give total credit to my friend Jason Edmiston. Wrote this book, Visceral. It's his art book. I think you can still get it. It's mostly, it's a look at a lot of his art. It's over his entire career, but he has like 4 pages in the back of this book which are super magical because he did this poster for the Hateful Eight. Oh, the glare is good. So he did this poster for the Hateful Eight for Mondo. very photoreal. I remember he showed this to me at a convention. We were doing a panel, and he showed it to me before it came out, and I was like, "That's not a screen print." And it came from this process he developed that he talks about in these basically these 4 pages. And I know myself and a lot of other Mondo artists who thought, we knew how to do everything before this. We grabbed this book and we got to this section and we just read these 4 pages over and over again and tried to decipher, tried to decode them because it was so crazy trying to figure that out. And I'm going to teach you what I learned from that process of trying to decode how that works, and then how I've applied that to movie posters I've been making for Mondo recently. So it's pretty cool. Let's see, Hannah just had a question pop up. Let's see this. How do you determine edition size for poster runs since they seem to vary somewhat based on the artist or the license? Oh, that's a good question. Um, it's all over the place. Like it could be based on the license. It could be based on it's a lot of its cost. Some of its collectability. I really like, I really like for posters I'm trying to get from other galleries and stuff if they're made like timed edition, like they're open up for a day or a week or something like that. I like those because then it's like there's no stress. You just roll up and get the one you want and leave. But it is kind of cool to see like something super limited. But it all it it's a bunch of variables, and you you pretty much mentioned them all. For a lot of it has to do with collectability. Like they want posters to have good collectability because it is kind of a commodity. You want these things to be collectible, so they're not like just disposable. Um, but I do like to see edition sizes go up a little bit higher as this collecting. That we've attracted a lot more people year after year, and so it is nice to see that happen. Sometimes it's really hard to know if something's gonna hit. Some of my posters have been like these cult classic movies like Wet Hot American Summer and the movie Rad, and I think it can be difficult to tell beforehand, um, how much people are gonna want that, you know? Stuff like a Marvel movie, it's no problem to say, like, they could print 700 or 1,000 of those, and they'll all sell. But, let's go ahead and jump in. I wanna show you I have 2 parts to my process. One part is I work on, an iPad and an Apple Pencil. That's where I do a lot of my preliminary work. And then we go into the computer and we do the final separation. So we're going to split this process, and I'll show you what I do in both, and hopefully uh, we can answer some of your questions. But for this part, since I'm going to be kind of heads down, I probably won't see any questions until we get through this. So let me switch. I'm going to switch cameras here, and hopefully this works okay. Never know with technology. So let's try this. Okay, as I mentioned, I like to do a lot of my preliminary work on my iPad in a program called Procreate. This is my iPad sitting inside a Sketchboard Pro case. It's a stand slash case that gives you a flat plane. It's nice and supportive so that I don't have to hold my iPad up on my lap or on a table. But this program, Procreate, it's pretty amazing. It's like $10, I think, and there's no subscription or anything. It's got a fairly rudimentary file system. I've loaded up my file system area with a bunch of blanks so that you can't see some of the stuff that's going on down below, since I can't show you those projects yet. So what I've done is I've placed at the top here some of the poster projects that I've done with the iPad and Procreate. And as whenever I get a property to work on, especially something a cult classic like Steamboat Willie or Rad, um, a lot of times what I like to do is I like to try and create a poster or an image that's kind of indicative of the era that it comes from. So when I started working on Steamboat Willie, I'll just show you some of the sketches here. So here's one of the sketch files. This file is 18. Well, let's see what this one is. Canvas information, because I don't think. Yeah, this one here is, as you can see, is just 8 inches by 11 inches, 300 dpi. So this was just meant to be like a sketch to work out how it was going to be drawn. And later on, I'm sure I blew it up to a bigger size. But another thing I want to show you here is when you're in Procreate, you're limited by this device's resources. So we look at the layers. At this size, I can actually have up to 97 layers, which is plenty for a sketch. Um, but we don't need to mess with any of that right now. So we have our sketch here, and you can see there's some designy stuff laid on top of it. You have your layers here. It's much like Photoshop, which is crazy for as little as this application costs and as much as it gives us. You got to hand it to Procreate. But you can see here, I work out a lot of different ways to sketch different things and then put it all together. Supports like layer grouping and masks and stuff. And we have a number of brushes and pencils and stuff that I like to work with. So you can get a lot of different looks and feels here. But for this, I basically just used like an animator pencil because I wanted, to go with kind of like a rough line. This, you can see here, you can move your canvas all over. You can draw on stuff and then just tap to get rid of it. Pretty awesome. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of people are migrating to this drawing experience over using like a tablet connected to a desktop computer. But whatever tool gets the job done. So we'll go back to our gallery here. So you can see that was one method I tried out when I was pitching the different designs. This was another design. I thought this was kind of like, uh, I was researching a lot of Victorian design when I was looking at how to make Steamboat Willie. And this was another design I liked a lot. It was very elegant, I thought, but it wasn't as fun and childlike as as this other design that we ended up going with, because you have the goat it's kind of like breaking the wall a little bit there, where it's like eating part of the poster. And if you've seen this short, then you know that that happens. He's eating everything in this cartoon. Um, but yeah, and this scene, again, I like to make things that are kind of like this could have been a poster for the film when it was released in theaters originally. And what I try to do sometimes is to create a scene or an illustration that supports the property, but it wasn't necessarily a scene in the property. So um, this shot actually isn't in it at all, but I thought that it supported it really well. It was a fun idea of the fisherman's catch. He's got mini. It does hook her up with the hook in the episode, in the short. But yeah, so this is cool. Let's go back here. We can see kind of an evolution. That I think that one was approved almost immediately, which was nice. I love it when there's a fast approval. Here, I was playing around with some colors here. I thought I might do just a Silver Age kind of version, no color. Um, Again, you can take advantage of all the different layers and laying color and all that stuff. But and then more color tests, and then we had this idea because this was to do some branding, to do an original logo. So I actually did that in here. A lot of designers probably would open up Illustrator or something like that, but since this is in my hands all the time, I'm doing more and more design stuff in here, and then I'll take it into Photoshop or Illustrator and actually finish it up with nice things. So these were some logo treatments I was doing for the credits block at the bottom of the poster. So yeah, and then you can see that we evolve to I started. I think these were some sketchy titles here, but then I start to evolve to more finished titles, and I think because I like hand drawn titles quite a bit, and so a lot of this actually ended up in the final poster. Then I start playing around with colors here in Procreate, which is still fun. If we open that file up, we can take a look. I mean, there's not a lot. I didn't mess around with layers a lot here, and I should say back when I was working on this particular poster, it would have been 2 or 3 generations ago for the iPad. This iPad right here that I'm working on now is the newest M1 chip 12.9. I think this has actually 16 gigs of RAM, which was not what was available to me when I was working on this poster. So when I was working on this poster, I can give you, let's see, if I create a new canvas here that's a 18 by 24 poster at 300 DPI. Let's take a look at the specs on this guy. So if we look at the dimensions here, we've got 24 inches, 18 inches with a 1/4 inch bleed, 300 DPI. Now at this size, with this current iPad's resources that are available in uh, in Procreate with 16 gigs of RAM, we are allowed to use 17 layers. So back when I did Steamboat Willie on an older iPad and an older version of Procreate, that layer count would have been much less. So it was a little more restricted. I couldn't do the entire poster in Procreate and then just send it to Photoshop and do a little bit of separation work to get it ready for print. That would have been ideal because coloring in here is awesome. But now I can. As you can see, I have 17 layers to work with. I could totally do a reasonable screen print in Procreate for an 18 by 24. And what's interesting is that this current version of Procreate is a little bit crippled right now. There's going to be an update to iPad OS. It's supposed to come out next week to give it, I think, up to version 15, I want to say. But right now, the version that we have of the operating system cripples every application so that it can only use like 5 gigs of RAM. So right now, Procreate is crippled to using 5 gigs of RAM. That's the limitation. But once they release that update next week and then Procreate releases a new version, then Procreate should be able to use much higher RAM count. And I guarantee that a week from now, or whenever that comes out, when I open up one of those files, like when I open up this file that we just created, we'll be able to go to the layer count, and this 17 will be much, much higher. The coolest part about that is that would also mean that a bigger poster, like the poster for Rad, which is a movie size poster, 24 inches by 36 inches, or this poster for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, that these should have much higher layer counts, and you could actually do much, much more work on these in the iPad, which is really awesome. And that's been the only limitation I've had with working on an iPad for the past like 5 or 6 years, however long the iPad Pros and the Apple Pencil has been out. That's been my only limitation, is working on much larger posters. I've been able to do all my books, comics, children's books, completely in this program, which is just been really nice. I mean, because once you try it and you're you're working on your deadlines like in bed or on the couch or on an airplane, it gets really, really hard to go back to the big desktop and your big Cintiq. So anyway, I think we can take a look real quick at some of these other things. Rad is another example. Rad is a cult classic, came out in the 80s. So I did some mock-ups for what those posters might look like. This was like a kind of a real BMX looking poster. If we go back, this one was kind of like I was thinking of like an all white background, kind of like Meatballs, one of those cool funny 80s comedies. Like I thought it'd be a much more simplified background. We got Crew doing his backflip there. I really like this one, especially because I got to put likenesses in it. But it's as anyone will tell you, when you're doing licensed properties, it's a whole lot easier to not have to worry about actor license to get their likeness rights. But this was another one. This is kind of like the Karate Kid. If you look at the Karate Kid poster, you'll see exactly where I was going with this one. Reusing some of my sketches, like I said, it's like Photoshop. You can just, if you drew it somewhere else, you can scan it in or draw it in here, pop it in, and then you can move things around in layers and stuff. We ended up going with some variation of this one, which I think was totally the right choice. It got approved really quickly and was easy to go through. And then I started to do some color mock-up, just to get some ideas of what colors might look like. One thing that stayed pretty consistent was this kind of like painterly background, which was all painted here in the iPad Pro. Um, I even did the hand-drawn logo I created here. And getting closer and closer to refine, you can see the if we look at this one, we can see Bart, the second guy, and I decided even after it got approved, I went back. I wanted to change his pose because I really like how on the top of his helmet there it says Bart backwards going up his helmet. I thought that was neat, but it was just a better pose I felt like for the final thing. And then here's the final guy, and so I can actually show a lot of this I think was painted here. Yeah, here we go. So you can see a lot of the stuff was constructed here. I turn these layers off and on. A lot of stuff painted here in Procreate on the iPad before sending it off to the computer. It's really easy to send things to another device. You just go here and you go share. You can send a PSD, PDF, all those other things. You can send even animated stuff. But typically I just send out a PSD to my desktop and then I start working with it over there. I'll show a couple more real quick and then we'll hop back over to the desktop. So these ones, like I said, were 24 by 36. These three posters. These ones are much more difficult, or at the time anyway, were much more difficult to work on whatever generation of iPad we were using. I think these were both done on the last generation of iPad, so there were many more limitations. I couldn't paint at full resolution the entire poster altogether. I had to break them into chunks. And if you when we show what this one looks like with titles and everything, this is not the full. You can see the pixel count here, 5475 by 7275. This is just a portion. This is just the illustrated portion of that poster. So this is actually close to full res for what is going to end up in Photoshop, which makes it easier to recreate these pixels in Photoshop when you have to do the separations. And we'll show you that in a little bit here. But as the resources become more and more available to the application, you'd be able to do more and more of this stuff on this device, which is cool because then you maintain pixel integrity, because every time you have to move this to another device, and then you might have to shrink or enlarge sections. You're scaling them up with transform tools and stuff. Every time you do that, it's manipulating the pixels to some degree. So you want to make sure if you're working at the highest resolution possible from the jump. But this is one where you can see I just illustrated stuff kind of in sections to make it easier when going. The flesh tone stuff is right here on this layer. The clothes are on this layer. All the little doodads up in the air and stuff are out here. We have the original sketches, I think, are somewhere in here. But anyway, so this having the ability to, as much as I can separate things onto separate layers here, I'm pretty sure if I go, at the time when I did this, this was probably the maximum amount of layers I could use on a file this size on the device at the time. When this newer M1 chip iPad came out, Procreate was able to kind of up their limitations a little bit. So I'm pretty sure we could probably add a few more layers here before we hit our limit. At some point we'll hit it. Well, we could get a lot more out of this now. That's pretty cool. Anyway, we won't bother with that. But at the time, if I could have had more layers, you can guarantee that I would have done more. I would have had the skin tone would have been on one layer, and then the skin rendering of these values would have been on a separate layer. Similarly with their hair. Anywhere you can separate colors as much as possible is always the way I'm thinking when doing a screen print. And that saves me a lot of times from having to recreate things completely. I should say, and I'm afforded more of that, but back when I did some of these older things, certainly with Steamboat Willie and with the Scooby-Doo poster, I mean, with this one, I had to totally recreate. This is just a color mock-up. And you can see that's pretty messy. Like if we get in here and look at these brush strokes, pretty messy. So this was a color mock-up that I did kind of based on Jason Edmiston's model where you do a total color mock-up. Nowadays I will do a color mock-up, but I just do it kind of as a thumbnail just to figure out a palette that I like. Um, but back when I was doing this one was the first one I did where I was trying to use mixed colors to create a print that appeared to have hundreds or thousands of color variation versus the typical screen print, which I think that this is maybe 9 or 10 layers of color. And if we had not done any color mixing, it would look like a very different, like a flatter, like kind of more cartoony image, and we wouldn't have been able to get some of these different varieties of like purples and blues and browns and reds because we would have been limited to just one. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. But so this was a color mock-up, and again based on Jason Edmiston's lessons from his book. This was a color mock-up that I had to take into Photoshop and then totally paint again in Photoshop with Photoshop brushes and everything. But at least the line art was full resolution, so we didn't lose any of that, which was good. Let's jump over to Wet Hot American Summer is one of the last ones that I did, and again, limited by the resources available to me in Procreate, I couldn't create a full 24 by 36 canvas and then utilize all the layer count that I needed. And so what I ended up doing was just like I did with planes, trains, and automobiles, I limited it to a certain area of the poster, only the illustrated area. And even then, I wanted to be able to paint and not have to worry too much about hitting my layer roof, because sometimes if I'm manipulating just this part of the truck, I don't want to mess around with pixels on the same layer that are of similar colors on these guys. I don't want to have that limitation at this stage yet. You do have to worry about that later when you're doing your color separations. But at this stage, I wanted more freedom to mess around with color values and stuff in here because I was confident that through color mixing, I could get this kind of purple and this kind of blue and this kind of bluish gray and that kind of blue on his jacket through color mixing with color separations. But I didn't want to worry about that here and how I'm going to, you have to keep a mind toward it. You have to have a little bit of an idea about how color theory works and how you warm up colors and cool colors and all that stuff. But I didn't want to have to be limited. So what I ended up doing was I would work on just the characters individually. And if we open up one of these, so here's like just the characters. If we look at we got a lot of, we can see we've got their skin on its own layer, and I can turn it off and on. We've got this first skin value, which is like a subtle, kind of subtle shading, and then like this darker skin value that we can turn off and on. Here's some of their dark lines. So I try to separate this stuff as much as possible because the more that I can keep this separated, the more that it's going to be easier when I take it to do the final preprint stuff, the final color separations. And you can see, I've got this layer here called 30% dark purple. So that is going to be a constant throughout this entire print. That I'm going to use 30% dark purple. That's like it's a diluted. So we'll take a dark purple ink, screen print ink, dilute it down so that it's about 30% opaque, or 70% translucent, however you want to think of that. So, but basically, it's a layer that's set to multiply, and the opacity of the layer is about 30%. And then you might scale that up or down, be like, oh, I like 35%. But basically, what that does is that gives us this ability to put this translucent purple on top of everything, including like even if you wanted to do skin or hair, clothing. Like you can see Elizabeth Banks, her hair's got some of it in there. But that's an older trick that I learned from Rob Jones back when I was doing like cartoony posters, that you could do a 30% black or 30% purple and use that as a constant color, a way to put shading and value across a flatter looking image and then it only costs you one layer on a screen print. You're burning one screen for this, and you get a lot out of it. Um, and then that kind of is like the idea of mixing translucent colors that I'm going to show in Photoshop kind of evolves out of that, because you can do a lot more with other diluted colors, um, and you get a lot of cool stuff. So this is the people, the actors. You can see like it kept evolving. And I should show in this version, I wasn't satisfied with Showalter. I could talk to you for a while about likenesses and trying to get them right. It is not easy, but I wasn't satisfied with Showalter, and I wasn't satisfied with Elizabeth Banks, so I kept working on them. And then the next, I think this one has their final, or closer to final. Yeah, so that's looking more and more like they are on the final poster. So after I got these guys all worked out, in this way, with here's like, yeah, it says new coupe. I've got all this stuff worked out. I would go here. You can, turn off and see. You can see my sketch sitting on top of it. I'm always painting under my sketches. You can turn off the background layer so they look really like evil and gross and weird. And then I would go up here and go to copy canvas. You copy the canvas. So it copies everything that it sees, everything that's turned on. And then I'd go over here to my truck. This is the truck. And I would just drop the people in wherever I needed them to sit in one layer on the truck. So they're flat here, but when I take this truck into Photoshop and I take these people into Photoshop, I get to put them all together, and then we'll have all the blues are separated, all the browns are separated, etc., etc. So that's how this is constructed, and it does look pretty gross without a background. So there's the white paper turned back on. Go back over here. It's also important to note that, and as I'll show, because I'm using this poster is created with translucent inks, not opaque inks. Almost all of the layers in each of these files are set to multiply, not normal. If we could show, that helps with, oh wait, no, these ones are set to normal. Forgive me for that. But wherever I need them to mix, they'll be set to multiply. But especially on the people, because on the people you're having this darker color sitting on top of this color, and you don't want to have to like just erase this color from underneath that color. You want them to blend together, and certainly where you're creating like this kind of a red, this is multiplied together with a few different colors. Let's see. So, and then here's one where it's just got all the props in the sky, like the bikini top and the different things. And then this was for the satellite, the Skylab that comes down. And then for this kid, we have in the sketch this kid getting tossed out of the truck, kind of a gag from the movie. And so he's getting tossed out here on his own, but we have his color here. It's all separated right here. We got his skin and everything. And you can see, some stuff's set to multiply, some's normal. And we'll show what that means more in Photoshop. But and then I have some treatments for the logo that I was working with hand drawing elements of that. I worked it out here, and then went in and recreated those in Illustrator or Photoshop. I can't remember which. But yeah, that's my Procreate process. We're gonna switch back to the desktop. All right. So yeah, after I've got everything pretty much the way it needs to be in Procreate, I just send out PSD files over the air. You can share. I didn't show, but you can share your PSD, and you have the option to choose AirDrop, which is pretty much just like Bluetooth straight to your desktop, which is nice. Or if you're working with other people, you need to send it out. You can send it over the web that way. But let's go ahead. Now we're going to bring up Photoshop, which this is so that, and then that'll show how we close everything off and make these things ready for the for printing, basically. Let's see. Connect. So we're going to switch to screen share here, which will take just a second. All right. Let's see. No, you love to see behind the scenes stuff. Okay. All right. So, I'm going to have to explain just a couple of things, just a primer for uh, Photoshop, for at least the way that I do things. Like I said, this panel is the way, it's the Mondo way, but really it's the JJ way. This is how I make this stuff. So when I bring in all my PSDs, I start to combine the similar colors, like colors. If I get all the blues together and I get all the reds together. Normally, when people create layers, so like we're looking at Scooby Doo here, you can create a new layer on the layers palette, and it's just a normal layer. Any pixels you put on there can be any colors. You're not limited at all with regular Photoshop. But what I use are called color adjustment layers. So if I'm surprised by how many people are not familiar with these because they are incredible. It's down here at the bottom of the layers palette. You have the option to add a solid color gradients pattern. So solid color is what these are. So I use a solid color adjustment layer. And what that does is it creates a new layer. So, we can go ahead and create one, and it'll create one with a filled in. So it's any color you want, whatever color. And it fills it in with a mask that is every pixel totally lit up. And if you're not familiar, I'm just going to get rid of this. If you're not familiar with what masks are, it's very similar to what a screen on a screen print is. Basically, in this mask section next to each of these colors, anything that is solid white will show that color 100%, and any pixel that is black will not show that color at all. And any gray in between on that mask will show it. So it's very similar to a screen print where you could think of a screen as like, each pixel being each area of the screen that's opened up for ink to pour through. And you could think of like if it's more white, then that hole for that pixel is bigger. And if it's not, then it's smaller. So that's how I think about it anyway. And I've been using these for pretty much, I don't know, like 20 years, however long I've been using Photoshop, because I love them. What's great about them is that you can totally create your piece of art. You can look at your color. Anything on that layer, anything painted on this layer is only going to be this blue. And so it's not like you're going to accidentally put red on the layer that has blue on it, because if you did that and then you send it to your printer prints it, and where you thought was going to be red is now blue, or usually you have a good screen printer and they'll catch that, but then they're going to charge you some pre-press time to fix it for you. So you want to have that stuff worked out ahead of time. But what's really great, the magic of color adjustment layers is like now that I've got this blue here, and this is all my blues, we can take a look at this is the mask for that layer lit up in red. It's showing you where that blue is showing. Like everything that's not red is where that blue is showing up in this image. We can turn off. If we turn off that, it basically turns the mask off, and now we're seeing like all the blue, which is a multiplied blue across that whole image. But what's also awesome, this is the magic of color adjustment layers. If I need to tweak that blue a little bit or find a different shade, a different hue, if I want to push it toward the green, I want to put some green into it. Watch how the image on the right changes. Look, I'm changing my blue to this green, and it gives it a totally different feel. So you can do this at any time without corrupting your pixels. You're not having to use a bucket tool to like drop color in, and this is the one thing that I'm like dying for them to implement in Procreate, because in Procreate you have to drag and drop. If I want to change this blue as it appears in this image, I'd have to drag and drop a color from the swatch, and then obviously it totally manipulates the pixels every time it does that. And if you've ever done it, you know what I'm talking about. You can drag colors in, and then zoom way in, and you'll see how the edges of the color change time after time, every time you need to change that. So what's awesome, you can totally, like I said, you can totally change these colors. You can make, oh, I need it darker, I need this to be redder, whatever you want to do. And where that helps a lot, I'll give you a good example. So here's my file for this Mickey Mouse Steamboat Willie. Um, you can see the palette is all worked out over here on the left. These are the colors I decided need to be in the inks, and they're all named. And the way you do things in screen printing is you want to go lightest colors to darkest from the bottom to the top. So this is actually the order that they would screen print in, because you want the dark stuff goes on top of the lights. If you try to print light on top of dark, that only works with really opaque inks, and it can often cause some trouble for screen printers. So that's just a good rule of thumb, is to go light to dark. But what I was talking about before is let's see, if I want to see how could I turn this file without having to change much at all to the layer count or the layer order. What if I wanted this to be Silver Age and use the exact same number of layers, just different inks? If I just want to swap out these inks. So what that saves us at the printer doesn't have to burn new screens, because every time a screen printer has to burn another screen for another color, your cost goes way up. And I mean, that's why screen prints cost so much, is for those screens. So the more you can reuse a screen, the better. So if we want to reuse these screens as they're going to be printed, but just change the colors and get another one, then it's real easy with color adjustment layers. All I had to do is go and find the tones of gray that I wanted for my silver screen edition. So this was the variant edition of that poster. Um, and some people love one versus the other, which is cool. I love them both. But I was really glad that we got to do that, and I think it's something that we'll kind of carry forward through the rest of the stuff that I'm doing for these Mickey posters for Mondo. If the original was a silver screen, black and white cartoon, then I'm sure that we'll do it that way. But I do want to talk about a little bit about Jason's process, because this is the stuff I learned from Jason's book that is kind of the secret sauce now to screen prints, is how to mix colors the way we're doing here, because these colors are totally mixed. Like if we turned off some of these, you're going to see certain colors change. Like look at this guy back here. He's if I turn off the green, we see all the yellow in him. And so you can see, if you look over right here, all of these colors are multiplied. So any color, any pixels on any of these masks, they're sitting on top of other pixels, are going to mix. They're combining. They're on top of each other, because we're using translucent inks now instead of opaque inks. That was the big trick, that we're now using translucent ink. So they're kind of diluted, so that they're see-through. So you can see through this green to see the yellow, and they combine together and they make different shades. So if this was a typical screen print with opaque inks, then everything green on here would be exactly the same green. And then maybe you could get away with putting like a slightly translucent black on top of it, or some dithered colors. But as it is, we've got, this is the limited amount of color we have in it, but a lot of this is mixing to make other colors. And you can see, where there is, here's my brown translucent color, brown. But take a look at Shaggy's hair. You would think there's brown in that, but there isn't. There's no brown in Shaggy's hair, which is cool, right? I mean, we're making these. Look at his. I just turned off this yellow. So Shaggy's hair is primarily made of purple and yellow, and that comes from color theory, color mixing. You know that if you mix those two colors, you can get this kind of a different shade of brown. So I wanted to show you how we determine that. So you saw before, I made a color. I made kind of what would be you try to limit the colors a little bit when you're trying to make a color sample. You're just doing a little mock-up of how the colors are going to look in the final. And I did that in Procreate. I tried to keep them a little bit close to each other, so the greens aren't too far apart from each other, the blues aren't too far apart from each other. But knowing certain ones would mix well together. So then I brought my digital And it's kind of funny because the more times you do this over and over, like by the time I've done, by the time I worked on Wet Hot American Summer, I didn't have to really figure anything out because I just knew how it would work. But the first time this Scooby, I like to show this one because this is the first one that I made while trying to figure out what the heck Jason was talking about in his book. Um, and so if we look, let me pull up the Scooby palette. Okay, so one of the big tricks that Jason shows is how he makes a swatch, a color mixing swatch. And this was kind of my interpretation, like my version of it. I actually used my color adjustment layers and I made masks to make a color swatch. I doubt very many people are going to go to all this trouble. But if you look at just this top row here, where it says 100%, let me see if I can zoom that in bigger. And we'll like scroll up here. Okay. So if you look at these are the colors that are represented here if they were at 100% of their value. And then what happens is if you look down this right column, so think of this as a grid. So this is your header row, and then these are your vertical rows. And on this one, all of these colors in this block are at 75% of their normal opacity. All of the ones in this one are 50% of their normal opacity, 25, and so on. So here we go. So these ones are 100. Sorry, I meant that. This is 100. Anything below the line is 100, below is 75. What you can see is you can see how 100% of this orange mixes with 50% of this yellow, or 50, or no, sorry, these are 75. 75% of this green with 100%. Sorry. Didn't mean to use the zoom tool. This yellow at 100% mixed with this blue at 75% creates this green. So what you're seeing is these colors can mix with varying degrees of opacity of the same colors because we're using translucent inks to form all these different tones and shades of different colors. Like you're getting like these funky, purples and all kinds of stuff. And so that's why all these different things are, and again, this is just mixing two colors. If you wanted to get crazy, I have not done any triads yet. I've been itching to do one that's a triad. I don't think the screen printers like that too much, mixing three, but I'm anxious to try one where I make a triad swatch to show what would it be like if you mix this pink and this green and this blue at varying degrees of opacity. Because then I can just do, I would do a 20% dither of the pink and a 30% dither of the green with 100% of the blue, and that might make some cool new color that works for whatever print I'm doing. I know this is a little bit complex when you're just hearing about it, but I guarantee that if you combined what you're seeing right here with actually trying to apply it, it'll just click. And then once it clicks, you're like, oh my gosh, because I've had to show this to so many different screen print artists that I work with because they're like, "Hey, how'd you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, let me try and explain it to you." But I make these swatches because I make one for each print that I do. Is very, very helpful because I can take my digital mock-up that I did in full color, which is exactly what I did with the Scooby. I pulled up the original mock-up from my Procreate. I had it in Photoshop, and I would zoom way in on my mock-up to see, okay, well, this purple right here, you're looking at the dithered version, so forget that. But imagine this was a solid color. I would look at that and try to isolate that color and try to find it somewhere in this swatch. And, if I found it right here, I say, oh, it's 75% of this and it's, 100% of that. Then I knew exactly where to select those pixels here and then drop them into, on its mask, drop them into here. So I would take, go to the pink and paint 75% opaque pixels there and 100% opaque of another color to make those colors. I hope that makes sense. I know it can kind of go a little bit over your head. It is fairly technical, but as I said, this is the way I do things, not necessarily the way everyone does things. A lot of people just like put stuff onto layers and then send it to the printer and then let them figure it out. And the printers are often very good about that, but then they do charge for that service. It's not free. And the longer it takes them to do, the more that you're gonna have to pay. But and then I just want to show this is a glow in the dark layer. Everything that's on this mask right here is actually printed with a translucent glow in the dark ink, an ink that responds to being charged by light. And then when you take it in the dark, it'll light up. So none of this stuff actually shows up unless you charge the print and see it in the dark, or I think with a black you hit it with a black light, you can see some of this stuff, and, um, I thought that was a neat thing. I hadn't done too much with glow in the dark, and it's kind of a gimmick, but, how often do you really look at that stuff? But if we just hop over here to I did wanna show a couple little, things that this is one I've just gotten this back from Mondo, from our pre-press guy over there. John Smith is really great at cleaning up separations, so things like this have to be cleaned up a little bit even further, either by the printer or by someone on your side. So if I'm working directly with the printer like I was with Scooby, I have to do some of that stuff, but, with Wet Hot and with, I don't have it pulled up here, but with Rad, I got, some assistance from John Smith, and, so let's take a look here. I did notice, if we zoom way in, we can see, let me put up the original on top of this. You can see David Hyde Pierce's shoulder here has, this blue in his plaid, um, and you can see I found this after John sent it back to me. I did not erase there's some blue poking through here, and some of this dark red is poking through in this area that I need to clean up. But the big thing I saw, look at Janine Garofalo's arm here, and look at where, this is called color trapping, where I want this skin tone to not bleed too far underneath this blue, because when it prints, you're going to see it. And I didn't see it before I sent it to Mondo, but I saw it after it came back dithered, because I let John Smith do my dithering now, because he asked that he do it. But normally I do all my own dithering, like I did with Scooby, and it turned out great. But John is an artist in his own right, so he sent this back to me, and I saw this. So I'm gonna have to fix this. I'm gonna have to trim back just this skin tone, because if when you see that not everyone's gonna notice that when they get the print. You're not looking at things like that closely, and it doesn't even look that bad from that far away. But if that's a true sign of amateur hour, when you're looking at screen prints, if you're seeing colors not trapped properly and they're bleeding all under each other, um, it's not a good look. And you may not find yourself working with awesome people like Mondo or other high class galleries. Um, but anyway, you can see these are the number. Look at the number of colors we have here. I think there's 9 colors here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So there's 9 colors here making up this image, which is very, very close to my original painting, which had, there's hundreds of subtle shades of different colors going on in here. But the way that it works out in the end is through the dithering. If a color is more opaque, then these dots are closer together, because these represent the holes in the screen, right? So the closer these dots are together, the more solid that color is going to look. And the more farther apart they are, the more translucent that color will look. I hope that makes sense to you. Um, I'm glad we have some questions to answer, but feel free to pop them into the comments, and we'll hit those in a second here. Let me stop sharing this. All right, cool. Let's see, what questions do we have? Oh, what's the name of Jason's book? I'm always happy to sell more copies of Jason's book for him. He deserves it. It's called Visceral: The Art of Jason Edmiston. It's literally 4 pages in the back, and um, I think at some point, one of us, maybe Jason, somebody's going to write a how-to book to do this stuff, because I mean, it is a lot of it's stuff that we only talk about behind the scenes, and we it's fun to geek out about, but it's uh it's maybe not so interesting to the average person. But I don't know if we had any other. Do we have any other questions? Let's see. Uh, no, I hope that. Well, if you think of any while I'm talking, real quickly, I want to talk about. I do need to plug our. Let's see. I do need to plug our Sketchboard Pro. You saw me using our Sketchboard Pro. This is a product that we created by accident, out of necessity, while working at my studio. I have a studio called Braintree House, where we're working on games. We're making our own original games and other IP, and all of us started working on iPads because we loved the iPad, obviously. And less and less we were using our tablet, our other tablets like our Wacom, our Cintiqs and stuff. In fact, our Cintiqs became stands to hold our iPad. Like we were just resting iPads on our Cintiqs, and our Cintiqs were never getting used. So we created this thing, and then when we did a Kickstarter and stuff because people told us they wanted one too, and we were never going to do that, but we decided, okay, we'll do it. And now, a year later, there's over 10,000 of these things have been sold, and we're continuing to grow this as its own thing. And but right now, you can use code Lightbox21. We'll get 15% off of one, and then we have free shipping in the U.S. and UK and most of Europe. But I am going to give away 2 of these right now. So let's see. And if you have drawn on an iPad and you are drawing on your iPad, then you probably will look at this and then immediately understand why you would want it, why it's necessary. None of us have any more wrist pain or neck pain or back pain like we used to have after hours and hours of working on these things. But let's see. I'm going to put up a code. Let me get rid of this. I'm going to put up a code right now. So the way this is going to work, the first person to use this code in the US and the first person internationally to use this code is getting a totally free Sketchboard Pro, which is like $100 and something in value. So here it is. Code is TubeDude. So go to sketchboardpro.com, use the code TubeDude. Somebody's going to get a free one. If it doesn't work, it's because somebody beat you to the punch, and it'll tell you that it's not working. But one person in the US, one person internationally is going to get it. And if you don't get it, then we do always have Lightbox21 as a code that'll get you 15% off. And I hope if you do draw on an iPad, please check it out because it'll make you feel so much better. Let's see. Let's take one last look at the questions here. We'll get rid of this code. Hopefully, remember that TubeDude. Let's see. May have already mentioned this. Do you have a favorite poster you've made? Also, do you have a poster that was surprising success? Favorite? I don't know if I have a. I think Scooby was one that was like it was important just because it was. Wait, let's see. Got something. Having a technical challenge. There we go. iPad was echoing everything. Yeah, Scooby was one, and the reason I showed it was because it was one that was such a level up for me. Like that, and unlocking those secrets, unlocking how to mix translucent colors, open doors. Like because I was, if you know screen prints, then you know they can be very graphic looking, like old like gig posters and stuff like that. But now we're at a point where we can make stuff that almost appears to be photographic, or at least it looks really close to the original paintings. And so yeah, Scooby. I actually have one right here to show, so you can see how it turned out in print. I mean, it looks exactly like it looked in Photoshop. I mean, there's no color shifting or anything. And that is a sign of 2 things. I mean, hopefully, it's a sign of good pre-press on my side, but it's a really good printer to work with that can decipher. And that's another thing too I should mention. Not all printers understand how to print things using this method, but there are like 3 or 4 in the US that are super good. And we love working with them. Unfortunately, there's so few of them that that's the reason why you order a Mondo poster and then you don't get it for like 4 or 5 months because they are super, super busy, and they're worth it. So hopefully, more people can learn how to make this stuff, because I would, we would love to be able to see these posters come out a little more frequently. But a surprising success, my most surprising success was probably the one that launched my career pretty much in Mondo. I made a poster like 10 years ago called My Neighbor Jake. It was a mashup of Adventure Time and My Neighbor Totoro. And my now one of my friends, Mitch from Mondo, I didn't know him at the time. He saw it and loved it. Invited me to be in a gallery show at Mondo, and it was just fan art. So that whole experience was like amazing because that opened the door and just working with them, time and time again. Every time there's a lot of artists out there that they found a style and a niche, and they like to stick to it. And it works for them, which is cool. Like, they they're doing their thing and they got a shtick, right? Like, but I like to try and challenge myself as an artist and like level up every time I do another poster. I wouldn't do it if it was just like a paycheck and like, oh, I'm just gonna make this poster and put it out because I have to love the property that I'm working on. If it's like a movie or something, I've tried to work on properties I didn't really like at all, and it didn't turn out super well. But with each of these posters, I do try to level up skills. Like there were a lot of the last one I did for Mondo was the Wet Hot American Summer. It had a lot of likenesses, a lot of people, and that's difficult because those likenesses have to be approved by the studio and sometimes by the actual actor that's involved. Like they have to approve how you drew their face, and so that one was a challenge just because it, had a lot of stuff in it. So I love to find those kind. I know this is like a long answer to your question, but I try to find new ways to love each project. And I do love them all differently because I learned something from them. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I think you saw that one before it. That one opened the door to do those, like, Mondo saw that one, and they were like, "Oh, he can do this kind of stuff too. Let's do this, something fun." I'm actually working on probably 4 or 5 different posters for them right now that all kind of have actor likenesses and they're, to some degree. Um, so yeah, that, uh, I hope that answers your question. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you do have other questions, my links are in the description. You're welcome to send an email or something. Sometime I'm not like super responsive to emails just because I am pretty busy, but I'm happy to eventually try to respond. Uh, but yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in and check out Sketchboard Pro. And I hope you're enjoying Lightbox Expo. There's lots of cool programming. I'm excited to be done with my programming so I can go out and actually watch some of the others. But take care and we'll see you later. Thanks.